you so much. This is the first time for me to attend a conference about our bilateral relationship that is not called India Japan or Indo Japanese, but Bharat Japan. Should it be called India or Bharat? In my country, too, there is a question of whether we should call it Japan, Nihon, or Nippon. Nihon and Nippon are exactly the same and interchangeable. Anyway, you now see that we've got the same question here in Japan. The word Japan has been used in Europe since the days of Marco Polo, but before that, in the long history of my country, the country was never referred to as Japan. Above all, the name Japan has existed only in foreign languages, not within our country. To the people inside what you think of as Japan, the country is Nihon or Nippon. The language spoken there is not Japanese, it's Nihongo. I'm not Japanese, I am a Nihonjin. If we use Bharat as the name of such conferences as this one more in the future, how about using Bharat-Nippon instead of Bharat-Japan? Who is called what? Reflect between the caller and the called, like how a father calls his son or a student addresses a professor. These names represent power dynamics. Both India and Japan are designations used by Europeans unrelated to Sanskrit or Nihongo. We have come to use these names ourselves, identifying with names created by Europe. This is where the power relations of domination and subjugation that modernity has brought about are expressed. Japanese people have been told by the British that they are a Far East country. If power relations were reversed, the UK would have been referred to as the Far West and the British as people from the Far West. It's not surprising that you, who are more sensitive than anyone else to the power relations implied by names, want to use the name Bharat more frequently from now on, especially since your constitution originally recognized it as the official name of the country. Now, it just occurs to me, Shinzo Abe may not have heard India referred to as Bharat very often, come to think of that. I suspect he never had such an opportunity. It is regrettable. In the next 30 years, until the mid-21st century, we will witness the evolution of two different forms of nationalism in two great countries. Chinese nationalism will become even more assertive toward the outside world. It doesn't care if the country isn't loved, as long as it is feared. However, this is a fragile form of nationalism because it's a nationalism that will never be content in itself until it makes Taiwan its own, regardless of how long it takes. It's a nationalism programmed to disrupt the existing world order, destined to make the Chinese people impatient and irritable. That's Chinese nationalism. Your nationalism, which will lead you to use the name Bharat more frequently from now on, is quite different. The most significant difference is that Indian nationalism isn't all about reclaiming lost ground, but rather about seeing the sky as the only limit. You have many young children, which is a stark contrast to China, where the country is aging rapidly. From the moment a baby is born, young men and women with children start thinking about the future, which extends about 30 years beyond the biological limits of their own lives. They do this because they begin to envision the future for their children. For example, if you are currently 30 years old, you can probably think 40 to 50 years into the future as your own time. But if you have a baby now, you will feel responsible for them for the next 80 or even 100 years. One definition that should be given to India is that it is a country that tries to think further into the future than anyone else, on a larger scale than anyone else. Shinzo Abe may not have heard the word Bharat very often. However, he had a steadfast belief in the future of India. It is in Japan's national interest to have firm ties with an India that is growing, that sees a bright future, and that has many children on the way. His was a conviction that it is in the best interests of Japan. On the one hand, there is China, which is selfish, increasingly aggressive, and eager to annex Taiwan. And on the other hand, there is India, which looks self-assuredly to the future and relies on the potential of its young people. To hedge against the nationalism of the former, it was the late Prime Minister Abe who hoped much for the nationalism of the latter. Why did Prime Minister Abe focus on India? It was because India embodies the future. It was because he believed that it was in Japan's national interest to be linked with India to hedge against the dangers of China. For Japan, a strong relationship with India is, after all, investing in India's future. To invest in India's future is to invest in Japan's future and the world's future. That is what the late Prime Minister always had in mind. The most painful aspect of Bharat-Nippon relations, therefore, is the loss of the giant locomotive that was Mr. Abe. We have lost a steadfast compass that was Mr. Abe. We have lost Abe, the most optimistic leader regarding India's future. The ship from Tokyo to Delhi has lost its captain. For a while, the ship will continue to sail on autopilot. But soon it will slow down and the bow will sway to the right and left. There are already signs indicating this is likely to happen. Japanese government leaders, from the Prime Minister to the Foreign Minister, have started to mention FOIP less and less. Instead, they use the term free and open international order. The Indo reference has been removed. The sharp regional focus has disappeared. As for Quad, it is shifting from being primarily a platform for military cooperation to focusing more on softer topics like vaccines, infrastructure, and climate change. This trend is not exclusive to Japan. We can observe similar developments in the US as well, where there is a move to temper the sharp edges of Quad. Why, you might want to ask, is this softening happening in Tokyo? I see three reasons behind it. Firstly, there are those who don't want to provoke China too much. I should ask, how long will it take for Tokyo's leaders to fully realize that China is a country that will become more aggressive if they show any hint of weakness? Secondly, Japan, post Abe, instinctively dislikes taking sides too decisively between friend and foe. They want both India and Pakistan to hold them in high regard. However, how long will it take for Tokyo's leaders to understand that as long as they do this, no one will truly hold them in high regard? Thirdly, there are those in Tokyo's political circle who want to downplay and preferably quietly bury the legacy of the late prime minister. FOIP and Quad were concepts with a clear focus for Abe. He wanted to counter China's power projection into the Indo-Pacific and its attempts to dictate terms through force by keeping the seas open. FOIP and Quad had three elements that were important to their creator, Shinzo Abe. The first was China, second was China, and third was China. He wanted to check China's projection of power into the Indo-Pacific and its attempt to dictate it by force by keeping the wide open seas free and open. The strong military ties between the four maritime democracies, Australia, India, Japan, and the US, were intended to deter China from military adventurism. For Abe, FOIP and Quad were all about China. However, that focus has since weakened. It's as if a focused picture has become blurry, lacking a clear point of focus. Here are my recommendations. Military planners in both Delhi and Tokyo must develop the habit of seeing each other as their most important partner from this point forward. When military leadership aligns more closely, the picture will once again become clear and focused. Secondly, there must be much closer communication between prominent Indian politicians like BJ Panda, whom I deeply respect, and the next generation of politicians in Tokyo. These two aspects are crucial to steering a ship without its captain, maintaining continuous military and political cooperation with the other side must become an enduring practice. Thirdly, both sides should make an effort to understand each other's values and cultivate a habit of mutual respect. Ask any Japanese lawmaker about the difference between the Republican and Democratic parties in the US, and they will likely provide the correct answer. However, inquire about the names and differences of the two major parties in India, and most will struggle to answer. My country has not forgotten Rabindranath Tagore. His works are still readily available in Japanese. Yet, how many people in Japan know that India's national anthem was written by Rabindranath Tagore? Not many, I would have to say. Speaking of which, let me take this opportunity to explain the Japanese national anthem, its lyrics in particular, which goes like this, and that's very short. May your life continue for 1,000 years, 8,000 years, until the small stone eventually becomes a large rock and moss grows over the whole surface. That's what the anthem means. What did you think? In fact, it is a song about love and deep friendship based on an ancient poem. I hope more people in India can learn about such things. Japan can adopt India's optimistic approach to the future by becoming deeply engaged with India. I believe that a thriving Japan will benefit India, the Indo Pacific region, and the world. It's been an honor to deliver the keynote today alongside the esteemed Honorable B.J. Panda and Professor Madhav Das Nalapat under the chairmanship of Dr. Nanda Kishore MS. I am pleased to be part of the inaugural session of the Bharat-Japan Indic Dialogue 2023. I would like to conclude my speech by expressing my gratitude to all of you for your efforts in preparing for this event. Thank you so much.